If you needed any other sign of how good things are going in the Phillies world, the most controversial topic at this point is the backup catcher position. Now, look, there are no ifs, ands, or buts about it that when JT Realmuto is healthy and back in the lineup, that this is his job. But in the meantime, and we're still not 100% clear how long that is going to be, although signs are trending towards him returning to this lineup in the near short term as the All-Star break is now completed. But I do want to talk a little bit about the Rafael Marchand versus Garrett Stubbs debate here. Now, to kick things off, I want to refer to our guy Luke Arcani, who will be back on the channel and cooking things up once we get a few tech things sorted through. But to get his tweet and his thoughts on things, he tweets out that I just don't get the obsession with the Stubbs Marchand thing. It's the backup catcher. They've both been great since JT went down. Why would you want Marchand to stay up here and play once a week when he can play every day in AAA and continue to develop? If they want to move on from Stubbs in the offseason, fine. I just don't think it's worth messing with right now. They're 16-10 in Stubbs starts this year. Stubbs is a big part of this locker room. Just leave it be. So a lot of good thoughts there. Now, I want to dive into all aspects of this. So to start out with, we understand the picture here. And to both these guys' credit, they've been excellent in JT's absence. And to dive into the production specifically, that in the games in which Garrett Stubbs has suited up without JT, he has hit 11 for 48 with 4 RBIs, 2 walks, 2 stolen bases, 1 extra base hit, and the team is 8-6 in those matchups. For Marchand, a little bit marginally better that he is 15 of 48 at the plate. He's got 6 RBIs, 2 walks, 4 extra base hits, and the team is 7-7 in those games. Both of those production you absolutely are happy with. Those are above what would have been expected for the backup center role or backup catcher role, and for what it's worth there, I'm pretty impressed with both these guys. That you should be completely satisfied with that being the production, and that is a pretty high bar for what is being considered for a backup catcher spot. That is not a lot of drop off, and I do think that should be put into perspective that a lot of teams would love to put in this position here. Now, for the Garrett Stubbs conversation, I think there's a lot of hurt feelings still dating back to last year, and specifically what I'm referring to here is against the Diamondbacks in the playoffs when Stubbs had the quote of, if the Phillies do what they came here to do, win 2 of the 3 games and clinch the second straight NL pennant, they're planning to add a wrinkle to their customary celebration. Who's ready to take a dip? Quote, I've seen that pool before, so I know exactly where it is. Backup catcher / team DJ Garrett Stubbs said Wednesday, referring to the famous pool beyond the right field fence at Chase Field. If we take two here against Arizona, we'll be beelining for the water. So we all heard this quote at the time, and we all heard it echoed out after the fact for quite some time. Now, for Garrett Stubbs, this is just a part of his charm. That I understand this aged as an incredibly poor quote. Do I think that was the difference in the series, or do I think this was the bulletin board material that caused the Diamondbacks to have a comeback and win that series overall? No, I don't. I think it's baseball. I think the Phillies were riding high. They were up 2-0 in that series. Stubbs let it get to him a little bit. Probably should not have said that, but I do think it was blown out of the proportion to that. And shout out to Stubbs, who did sit down with the guys over at Crossing Broad, who more or less said the same thing, that it was blown out of proportion. He did not mean it in this massive, mean way, and they wouldn't have been the first team to jump in the pool after getting a victory out there in Arizona. So I understand it obviously aged poorly. I wish it did not happen looking back, but I don't think that something's fair to hold against him to this massive extent here. And one of the biggest, driving forces of why Garrett Stubbs is important to this Phillies team, he's a vibes guy. And to an extent, that does matter. That we've seen how electric and just how great this clubhouse is as a Phillies team. Truly one of the most tight-knit locker rooms that I've seen ever in professional sports. And it's the little things that you do see. It's the dumping water on the guy who's interviewing after the game. It's all these guys hanging out at the All-Star break and at the home run derby to watch Alec Boehm do his thing and have a chance, who performed much better than I think anyone would have expected in that opportunity. You just see the way they interact with each other, the handshakes, the bat flips, all these things. You can see that these guys, they love each other. They get it. It's a tight-knit team. And I do think a guy like Stubbs, who is far more instrumental to that type of locker room vibe than the actual on-field product, it is a dangerous game to start messing with that. Frankly, that's one of the reasons that I was surprised that they did go another direction and move on from Whit Merrifield, as I thought it was going to be an area where they just did not want to mess with things. But for Stubbs specifically here, I just don't see the pros and cons weighing out in favor of rocking the boat in that direction, in favor of a really marginal update and a guy that truly will not play in the playoffs. And to get that fully into perspective here, let's just take a look at what those numbers are. So for JT, if Realmuto stays healthy, he's catching every game, which is what happened in 2022 and 2023. JT played all 13 games last year and all 17 games the year prior. Starting catchers don't get days off in the playoffs. So if everything goes according to plan, this isn't even going to be a question in October and hopefully November. So that is the letter of the law here. The reality is this is still JT Realmuto's job, and there is no doubt about that. That as great as Marchand has been, as good as Stubbs has looked, it's not like they're challenging a guy who has been at many times in his career labeled the best catcher in baseball. And JT, to his credit, has been an absolute Iron Man throughout his Phillies tenure. That this is not a guy that has had these extensive opportunities to look at these backups. I'm glad he's resting up. It's clear that he's been a warrior. He's taken an absolute beating this year on a night-to-night basis. Stuff like foul balls getting hit off him and a ton of other situations. I get it is the normal wear and tear of a catcher, but I do respect the way that JT just musters through on a night-to-night basis, and I do expect that to continue going on for the foreseeable future once he does step back behind the plate. Now, for Marchand here, that I think it is worth noting a little bit of his long-term outlook. That as much as I am hyping up Stubbs and his importance to this team, I do think he should be looking over his shoulder a little bit here. And for Marchand, he's 25 years old. Stubbs comes in at 31, so a little bit of a difference there. JT obviously still has a couple years ahead of him, and he does not look like he's slowing down, although I believe he's 33 years old at this point, so one would expect a catcher to start to be hitting that wall to an extent. There have been no signs of it to JT, and I think he's earned the right to allow him to continue until he proves that it is no longer the case. But for Stubbs, I think he should be looking over his shoulder for the job next year. Now, for Marchand, he has not received a ton of MLB at-bats to this point. That he showed a little bit of opportunity in 2022, just 3 games, 8 at-bats there. In 2021, 52 at-bats in the 20 games that he did step up, and then he has not returned to the majors until this season. And of course, in his 51 at-bats, he's got 15 hits, 4 doubles, which is impressive. They've both been very good defensively as well. It's pretty interesting when you look at the top metrics as far as pop times for throwing out runners. All 3 of these guys rank incredibly highly across the MLB. JT right in the top 2 in the MLB. Stubbs even in the top 10, and Marchand right in that same kind of mix there. So again, you're kind of really picking from a lot of correct choices here is kind of the outlook here. But for Marchand, I agree with Luke's initial point here that the long term should be for this kid to continue to get better, that he is just 25 years old. This isn't like a Garrett Stubbs that, you can't send down any longer, that it shouldn't be looked at as a demotion. And worst comes to worst, when rosters expand, when we get to that point of the season, you can bring him right back up. And if his bat is that valuable at that point, you can use him. But at this time, I think there's more value in allowing him to continue to develop and getting experience, controlling pitchers, calling a game, getting the hits on an every night basis. That is something that as a 25-year-old, I think should be valued in his outlook from here. So I do hear you. I don't even disagree that Marchand is the better option at backup center or backup catcher here. But I do think that is a guy that is worth seeing his long-term development and sticking with the vibes that are currently riding with Garrett Stubbs here. There's a lot of baseball still to be played for this Phillies team, but none of it is going to be decided by either one of these guys. So I think we can relax and getting too fired up overall. But I do want to hear from you guys in the comments. So let me know what you think on who should be taking that job. What do you think of the management from here? Anything else that you got on your mind? We got a lot to break down right here on Phillies Digest. We will have a ton of content churning out as the season continues on. We're heading into that final stretch where the trade deadline is coming. The playoffs are on the horizon. So it's going to be a fun stretch of Phillies baseball. Appreciate you guys for locking in for your new home for Phillies news here. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button. Drop a like on this video. I'll be talking with you next time. Peace.